Hi, I'm Jilly G. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you my gluten-free sourdough English muffins. And I'm going to be using my brown rice sourdough starter. And I'm going to be putting it into a clean jar, and then after I mix it up and use some of the starter, I'll refresh it, which is a half a cup of brown rice flour, a half a cup of spring or distilled water, and then I'll cover it with my cheesecloth, let it sit out for about 8 to 12 hours, and then put the lid back on and put it back in the fridge. And this has been going for about a month now. So it might get a better rise than my bread did. And really not very many ingredients. And this will be dairy free as well. So I'm excited to show you that too. So first thing I'm gonna do, take off my tape, put it onto my new jar. And some of you might be wondering why I have not used any yeast. And the reason for that is yeast does not agree with my body. And I know a lot of us have different ailments or allergies or things like that where certain things bother us. And commercial yeast is one that bothers me. So unfortunately, you won't see any yeast on my channel. But with sourdough, you get a very similar effect. So I don't have any equivalents to give you of what the yeast would be in this recipe, but I encourage you to experiment. And then let me know how it works out for you. I hope that it doesn't bother you too much, that you won't see any yeast recipes here, but I thought it was about time that I explained that's why you haven't seen any yeast and why you won't. So my sourdough starter has been in the fridge. I've been feeding it once a week, and how I do that, I'll give you a refresher, is once a week. If I need to discard anything, I will. And sometimes I'll use what I discard in a recipe. I know in some of my comments people have mentioned, don't throw away any of your starter, use it in a recipe. And that's what I've started doing. I encourage you to do the same. Make waffles, make pancakes, make this recipe. There's so many possibilities. So what I'm gonna do is, because it's been in the fridge, you'll see it's a little bit separated. I am actually gonna stir it up first. I'm going to try not to make a mess of my clean jar. I'm going to measure out 3/4 of a cup of my starter. And then pour the rest into my clean jar. I'm going to leave that on its side for a minute, and I'll put the rest in my measuring cup there. If it's a little bit more than 3/4 of a cup, it will be fine. And I probably should get my funnel. And because my spoon is already in there, we'll just put the spoon through the funnel too. Anything to not make a mess. And let me know what you've been making with your sourdough. Some of you have commented that you've been using it and you've made bread. Let me know what else you're going to try or have already tried. Let me know how it's working out. So that is ready. I'll just set that aside for now. Get a little bit more out of here. And that will be very full. It might spill over, and that is just fine. And as I mentioned last time, you don't have to have a stand mixer. My hand mixer doesn't have the dough hook attachments, and so I've not used that. You could just use your good old-fashioned muscle instead of a stand mixer. And even though I do have a dough hook attachment, it's easier with the paddle attachment. So the ingredients that I have for today is 3 cups of my gluten-free flour mix, 3/4 of a cup of my starter, and that is a heaping cup. I'm actually surprised it has not spilled over yet. 1 egg, 1 tablespoon of honey, 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt, 1/2 cup of potato starch. I have 1 scant extra cup of my gluten-free flour mix. Sometimes this dough will be a little bit more sticky than we want it to be. So we may or may not use all or part of this extra cup. And then I have some cornmeal, and right here, I save my bacon grease. And today I'm using 1/4 cup of my bacon grease. You could use vegetable shortening, you could use lard, you could also use butter. I've been working with coconut oil more. I haven't used it in this recipe yet, but coming soon I'm gonna try it out and I'll let you know. And then I have 1 cup of water. So dry ingredients in the bowl of my stand mixer. My 3 cups of gluten-free flour, 1/2 cup of potato starch. If you don't want to use an egg in this, you could use a flax egg. And I'm just going to mix it a couple of times just to get those dry ingredients mixed around. It really doesn't take very much at all. And just to make it easier on myself, with my wet ingredients, I'm going to mix them all together. So again, 1 cup of water, 1 egg, and my 1 tablespoon of honey. You could use white sugar if you want to. And you could use a fork, but I'm just going to use my spatula here and try not to make a mess. And it doesn't even have to be fully combined. The mixer will combine it all. If you were using sugar, you would add it in with the dry mixture. With the mixer on low speed, I'm going to pour in my water, egg, and honey. My 3/4 of a cup of my sourdough starter. I made a mess with my starter all over my measuring cup. Stop the mixer and scrape out your measuring cup. I'm going to turn my speed up to medium. In goes my 1/4 of a cup of my bacon grease. I'm going to turn the speed up to medium and then to high and just make sure everything is really mixed in. Scrape down your bowl. I'm going to mix on high for about 5 minutes and see what we've got. I'm going to see if we need to add in any extra flour. And it is holding together really well, but I am going to add in a little bit more flour. It's a little bit wet right now. And I'll probably go about 1/4 of a cup at a time. Start out on low and then increase your speed to high. I'm going to go another 1/4 cup of flour. Get some parchment paper. Gluten-free dough can be really sticky, and so I always knead it on parchment paper just to help it not stick so much to the surface. I'm going to sprinkle just a little bit of flour. And it really comes out of the bowl really nice and clean. And I'm just using a little bit of extra flour. And the parchment paper helps you pick it up and move it around. And it feels a little bit tacky, but really not sticky. And if you try to pick it up, it will kind of fall apart. And most of what I'm doing right now is just making sure it's the right texture. And that's why I'm adding in a little bit of extra flour. But it's really coming together nicely. You'll know you have enough flour when you can start picking it up like this and it doesn't just fall back down to the parchment paper. I am going to use just a little bit more flour. And it's the tricky part too, because if you add in too much flour, then it will be too dry. I'm going to flatten it out just a little bit. And using my bench scraper, I'm going to try to cut it into about equal pieces. I can usually get 8 out of this dough, so let's go for 8. Depending on how big you want to make your English muffins. So just pick up one of your pieces and start forming it into a disc, using extra flour as you need. And now comes our cornmeal. So I just have a cookie sheet lined with some parchment paper, and I'm going to sprinkle down some cornmeal. And this is a really good size. You could make smaller if you wanted to. And if you cut your dough perfect, they'll all be the same size, which already I can tell you this one's going to be smaller than that one. But it's okay. And you can see how fast and easy these really come together. And not a lot of rise time either. Flour your hands as needed. It's really not super sticky, but if you've used potato starch before, you'll notice it really does make your hands a little bit sticky. Try to make them all the same size if you can. So far they're all different sizes. Well, maybe 2 of them are the same size, but that's okay. I've mentioned before, I am not a professional bakery. It's okay if they are misshapen and different sizes. And I am going to space these out just a little bit more. And I used about 3/4 of a cup of this extra flour. So all in total, it was about almost 4 cups of flour. Okay, they look really good. I'm going to let these raise for about 45 minutes and then I'll show you how to cook them. It's been about an hour and a half. You don't have to let these rise for very long. I mentioned I was going to let them rise for 45 minutes. Time got away from me. They puffed up a little bit, but not much. In some of them, you can still see where my fingerprints were. So we're going to cook these in a dry skillet. And I've got my cast iron skillet here, but you could use whatever frying pan that you have. And then some of my leftover cornmeal. As soon as my pan gets hot enough, and this is just over medium heat. I want it to get hot, but as we know, cast iron takes a little bit to get hot, and then once it's hot, it stays hot. Get a spatula just in case. And I don't know if you saw, but my cookbook is right over here on display. I decided to give the napkin holder a break. While we're waiting for my pan to heat up, I just want to say thank you so much for everybody that is watching my videos, leaving comments, making my recipes, buying my cookbook, sharing on your social media. Thank you guys so much for participating in this with me. But I'm really excited. You can make so many things with English muffins. One of my favorite ways is, of course, split it in the middle, toast it, and put cream cheese and jelly. That's a really delicious way to eat an English muffin. Eggs Benedict, coming very soon, by the way. I also love to make homemade breakfast sandwiches out of English muffins. Whether you put sausage or ham or Canadian bacon, eggs and cheese, whatever you like. Or even just a regular turkey sandwich. Egg salad, chicken salad. There's so many uses for an English muffin. And I think my pan is getting nice and hot. I'm just going to sprinkle on some cornmeal. And I'm turning them top side down, just because the bottom already has some cornmeal on it. I've turned my heat down to medium-low. So my oven is preheating to 400. Once these get as brown as you'd like them to be on both sides, I'm going to stick them in the oven. I want the top to get that brown color, the top and the bottom, to get this darker color, but I want to make sure they're cooked all the way in the middle. And because they are kind of thick, and as we know, gluten-free bread is pretty dense sometimes, but I really want to make sure the inside is done. And I'm just going to use this same cookie sheet that they've been sitting on. And I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of cornmeal on here too. I know it's not traditional to bake these in the oven. As we know with gluten-free baking, sometimes you have to do things a little bit different. A little bit more cornmeal. And then I'm going to start browning my other 4. This one is super extra big. And you could have preheated your oven before you started, but a lot of times when I make these, I make a double batch. And so I've got more that need to go in the pan. And so what I'll do then is preheat the oven, and then usually by the time they're all done, you could even have 2 frying pans going at once, and then they're all ready to go in the oven at the same time. And they don't take very long in the oven. But of course you want to make sure they're done on the inside. And if I had done a better job of making them all the same size, they would all be done about the same time as well. And once your English muffins are as brown as you'd like them to be, I'm going to spread them out a little bit more on this cookie sheet here. Okay, we'll go in the oven for about 20 minutes at 400. My English muffins have gotten even a little bit puffier in the oven. I'm just going to flip them over. It's really interesting. Gluten-free dough feels heavy. If you've done any baking with gluten-free dough, you'll know what I mean. But they really feel heavy. And some of these thicker ones, I for sure know they are not done in the middle yet. These smaller ones already feel lighter. Not because they're smaller, but because they're cooking faster. So these will go back in the oven for about another 10 to 15 minutes. These smaller ones I might take out sooner, but we'll see. And you could have just kept them going in the frying pan and covered it with a lid, but because they are kind of dense, I prefer to finish baking them in the oven. So my smaller English muffins are already cooked through. I'm going to put these bigger ones back in the oven for probably 10 more minutes. But these ones look really good. And they always say never cut an English muffin, but you use a fork. So let's see what one looks like on the inside. Very hot, very steamy. They look really good. And of course, if you want these toasted, put them in a toaster. Because I don't have a toaster, I usually will toast these under the broiler. Split them open just like this, lay them on a cookie sheet or a cooling rack, either one. Not this one. This one has some kind of plastic coating. But one of my metal cooling racks. And then cut side up, I'll put them under the broiler just until they're toasted all the way through. They're really good. It's almost like a biscuit. Not flaky like a biscuit, but kind of like a biscuit texture on the inside. But really good. And they're a nice size too. Gonna eat the whole thing. As with a lot of things that are gluten-free. Is it exactly like a regular English muffin? No. But it's a really good gluten-free English muffin. And my other ones are ready to come out of the oven. That one is so big. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, let me know, and we'll see you on the next one.